a CGC mistake, an inverted scam, or maybe just plain ignorance. All I know is I may have just saved a stranger from spending $10,000 on a book that is worth much less. This is a PSA for those Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans who are in search for a TMNT number 1. I recently came across an eBay post of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1 claiming that it was a first print at a 7.5, while in fact this was a third print. The reason why I needed to bring this up is because a 7.5 as a first print versus third print is probably over a $10,000 difference in price. This was an auction with 4 days left, so I do not want to assume malicious intent by the seller. It is a mistake that I would have made myself. Normally a CGC label, if it has no citation of what print it is usually is the first print. If it's the second or third print, it would explicitly state it there. Unfortunately, this CGC label did not say anything, so on first glance, I would have also thought it is a first print. I can't tell if this is a mistake in labeling by CGC or if there's something fishy going on, but because of the reholdering scam that happened just this past year where books were swapped in and out of slabs, I think it's important that we bring up anything that seems suspicious. The only reason I knew it was a third print is because I recently did some research on how to tell the difference between first, second, and third prints. So maybe let's go through some history. Note there are multiple prints of the initially released TMNT number 1 from 1984. I will only be talking about the first 3. So print 1 was released in April of 1984 with a print run of 3,000 books. It did so well that a couple months later in June of 1984, 6,000 books were released. And that did so well that in February of 1985, another 36,000 books were released. There are subsequently more books released, but I will only be talking about these first 3, mainly because they look to have very similar art on the cover. I'll be talking about the ways that you can tell the difference between first, second, and third print. First, if you have a raw book, and secondly, if you have a slabbed or encapsulated book. It's much easier if you have a raw book, because if you open up the front cover, on the back of the front cover, if you have a second or third print, it'll explicitly say second print, third print. If it's the first, it won't say anything. Secondly, if you open up the back cover of the book, if you have a first print, you'll have an advertisement for another comic called Gobbledygook. If you have a second or third print, your back cover will have an advertisement for t-shirt iron-ons. Now, if you have an encapsulated copy, this is where it gets a little bit tough. So the first one that I want to explain is how I found the difference between the first, second, and third print. If you look at the second T on Turtles, there's some art of a splash of blood on the second T. For the first and second print, you will see a single splotch of blood, but if you have a third print, you'll see a wider splotch of blood. Another way to tell difference is something unique to the second print. If you look above Raphael, the building on top of him, there is a small dot above the corner of the building. It looks like hatch marks. This is unique to only the second print. You will not find that in the first or third. Lastly, something that will be harder to do unless you have all 3 prints next to each other is you'll see that the first print is darker red, second print is a little bit lighter, third print is a little bit more pinkish. So these are the main differences I found when doing a quick Google search on the differences between first, second, and third print. If you have any other differences or any corrections, please leave those in the comments below. So back to the story. Knowing what I knew about the second T in Turtles, I took a look on eBay sales because I was curious as to what the different prices were today, because we know that there's a fluctuation in market value for books itself. Looking at this, I saw that there was a book auctioned, and today was a Monday. It was going to close on Friday, so it had about 4 days left to go. It was already close to $4,000. Looking at the book, I noticed that the splash mark on the second T looked like there was a lot more red dots. So this told me this was a third print, but when I was looking at the description, the seller was saying this was a first print. So I wanted to do my due diligence. I kind of checked CGC. It did not say it was a second or third print on CGC, so that was a little bit weird to me. If this was in fact a second or third print, CGC should actually call it out in their description when you look up the certification number. So here's an example of a second or third print certification when you look it up on CGC. So when I see a third print book encapsulated in a CGC case with a first print label, this gives me a little bit of pause. Did CGC make a mistake here, or is something going on? With many of us still reeling from the holdering tampering incident from earlier this year, where books were swapped in and out of CGC cases, I think it's still important to highlight any activities that may seem suspicious. Again, I don't want to initially assume malicious intent. This is why I wanted to message the seller first to see if they had any idea. This was my exact message. So I said, "Hi, I wanted to confirm if this was in fact the first print. From searching I've done comparing first, second, and third prints, if you look at the second T in Turtles, it looks like there is a blood splash in the middle. One way I can tell the difference between if there's a single splash, one dot of red, versus a larger splash of red. The item you have looks to have a larger splash of red, which may indicate it may not be a first print. I wanted to bring this to your attention so you can double check this info as well in case I am interpreting this incorrectly. Thanks." So I sent this on a Tuesday. About an hour and a half later, the seller took the post down. And I appreciate they took the post down because they were not going to continue to try to sell this book and claim it's a first print, knowing that it's probably a third print. I am still waiting for a response from the seller. Again, I do not wish to assume malicious intent by the seller. I'm still just waiting for a response, and I'm glad they stopped the auction. The reason why I thought this was important is because of the sheer value of a first print to a third print book. If someone is willing to spend their hard-earned money for this book, they should know what they're getting. So if we're looking at Go Collect at a TMNT number 1 third print at a 7.5, we see a fair market value of about $625. Recent sales being $585, $560, $675. But if we look at a first print book at that same grade, fair market value is $11,000, with recent sales that are confirmed about $10,800, even $15,000. So claiming a book is a first print book versus a third print book is over $10,000 of a difference. So I thought it was very important that you be aware of what you're buying and that we kind of look out for each other when looking for books ourselves. So wanted to share this info with you all. Again, not claiming any malicious intent. I'm still waiting for a response from the seller. Once I do, I'll post an update to this, but I wanted to get this information out there as soon as possible. I felt like I had to come out of my hiatus of video making because I felt like this was an important thing to bring up. All I ask is if you're looking for a book, it's always good to stay vigilant so you know what you're buying. From my comic journey to yours, make it your own. Stay safe out there all.